Let's understand this. Without a person, there really is no relationship. And out of the 5 things that you really need to pay attention to about keeping the person in the process. So we've got to look at these 5 items one by one and make sure we're addressing them. Because clearly, if you don't engage in the personal relationship, you really don't have one. So let's take them one by one. Item number 1, how do the customer want to communicate? How do we communicate? There are so many ways of communicating right now. We have to take a good look at it. You can phone, you can meet person to person, you can email, and you can text. Well, you know what? You may have a preference on how you want to communicate. You may have a system that reaches out to your client during that process. But it's most important that you ask the client up front, how is the best way to communicate with them? If you don't know that that client really would prefer a text and you keep emailing them, they're only going to be frustrated. It's only going to cause them consternation. It's not a way of making them happy. So paying attention on how that customer wants to be communicated with is very important. Some people need constant reassurance. Other people don't want to hear from you until you're done. You have to ask that client, you have to explain to that client about how you're going to communicate and what the steps are going to be so that they're aware from the beginning of that process. Again, keeping the person in the process is very important. How you communicate, even more so. Item number 2, thinking about the personal call. You know, so many of us are out there trying to make sure that we communicate with our people effectively, that we do things like have autoresponders and email batches, things that are automatic into the system. But one of the most powerful things that we do is reaching out personally. So let's talk a little bit about this case. The most important thing that you can do, the most impactful communication there is person to person, whether sitting across the desk or on the other end of the phone. Many of my clients use video chat. It doesn't matter which one of these you use, but understand the value. And the long and the short of the process, the video chat, the person to person, that phone call are a priority. Why? It's the strongest communication. We follow that up by text messaging. Last but not least is an email. Think about this before you send that next email. Email should only be used to follow up a more personal form of communication. You want to follow up an email with a phone call? You want to follow up a phone call with an email? Either way, email is the lowest priority. Why? Because we get thousands of them. Item number 3, your timeline, the risk and reward of following the plan. You know, people don't often understand the process behind getting a loan. They often don't understand the importance of doing certain things at certain times. Loan officers themselves often make critical mistakes. The critical mistake they make is not by doing most of the work up front in their pre-approval process. They don't spend the time explaining to the customer the importance of your system, the importance of the timing. When you sit there and lay out the process for the loan officer and how you interact with their realtor and that customer, it's invaluable because many words get thrown around during the course of a process like this. Many things have generic terms. What's application mean? What does contract mean? What does I need that by closing mean? They could all mean wildly different things. When you're specific in laying out your process and your timeline, when you tell people, I need that W-2 by Thursday at 2 o'clock. I need that tax return by Friday at 1 o'clock. And then you explain to them the why. What's the risk and what's the reward behind following that process? You know, many people go out there and look for property without a fully bona fide pre-approval. And they show up at your doorstep with a copy of a contract. And now they want to close. And you're starting from ground zero. If they don't get you their documentation quickly, if you don't have all the material you need to move forward, it could delay the process. If you don't explain that to the client, then they don't know. Many of you worry about by demanding too much stuff up front before you pre-approve them, that they may get frustrated with you and go find someone else. Let me be frank with you. I would rather the customer feel like they're doing a lot of work up front than be scrambling around a day or two before closing trying to put documentation together. Do the work up front. Explain to them the power of your process. Share with them exactly the risk and the reward of them following your plan. When people know the benefits of doing things the way you do them, they'll happily go along. It will ensure a smoother process and absolutely positively will generate more referrals. Item number 4 of the 5 things you need to know, and I alluded to this a little earlier, do the hard work first. The loan officers who take people's words for their information, the loan officer who doesn't check documentation, the loan officer that doesn't set standards is generally setting themselves up for a challenge. People who issue pre-approvals without seeing documentation may be in for a shock when tax returns come back. People who assume that when the client tells them that their credit is good are often shocked that we don't have a loan to do once we pull credit. People who sit there and say, well, my income is this, only to find out that they've written off huge expenses on their tax returns and now their income is nowhere near as provable as they once thought. Sometimes people have it reversed. Sometimes they don't know how much money they really make. They don't know how much income they really have. They don't know what it is that needs to be done going forward. And that's why I'm saying, if you take the time to structure the deal and do the hard work first, then most of the time, it's just a matter of a copy of a contract of sale, appraisal for value, proper insurance, so that we can close quickly, swiftly, and easily. Again, setting the hard work up front saves you from chasing your tail at the end. We don't like scrambling to the finish line. No one wants their closing in jeopardy. Everybody'd like to close smoothly, and you do that by doing the heavy lifting up front. Item number 5, understanding that closing is just the beginning of the process. In any type of relationship, it's how you deal with the long term. It's not just, hey, we got this done and then we move on. They may love you at closing, but let's be honest. If you don't follow up and follow through with them, then they're going to forget you. Did you know that the average person said about 80% of the time they'd happily refer the loan officer that did their last loan? Do you know that less than 14% of the time they actually do? Think about that. 80% of the people moving forward do a perfectly good enough job to get that next referral, but only 14% or less remain in the mind of the person that they did that business for. What failed? Well, they didn't understand that the closing was just the beginning of the long-term relationship. Do we send handwritten thank you notes to everybody that participated in the deal? Do we follow up a couple of weeks after closing to see how the move went? Do we speak to them a week or two before their first payment's due to make sure that they're comfortable and confident with where they're mailing that payment or how they've got that payment set up? Are we providing ongoing value to that customer over time? Remember earlier when we talked about video couponing? If we're dripping on that customer once a month with a video coupon, we're keeping ourselves in front of them. Do we put into our tickler system to call them on their birthday? Not just send a card, not just send an email. Pick up the phone and call. You'd be amazed that within 2 or 3 weeks of you calling a past client on their birthday, that you generate a referral from that client. It's almost staggering how often that happens. There's also the annual review. So many people get their loan and close it and have no idea that they need to pay attention to it along the way. An annual review for that person, just to make sure that that loan is working for them just as good now as it did when they took it, is invaluable to that person. How many closed clients do you have out there right now that would benefit from either refinancing their loan, shortening their term, or even selling their house and buying the one they really wanted? You know, it's amazing that the average consumer pays no attention to where rates are. They pay no attention to where the market is. Just once a year reaching out to them and doing an annual review is something you can do today that will certainly improve your tomorrow. To recap, item 1 was, how do we want to be communicated with? Does that customer prefer phone calls, face-to-face meetings, text messages, or emails? It's really important for you to know how they want to be communicated with. Item number 2, understand the value of each communication, whether it's personal contact through a face-to-face meeting or a phone call, whether it's a text message or it's an email. Each one carries a different weight. Item number 3, managing the timelines. Setting a timeline is the same as setting an expectation. What has to happen? When does it have to happen? Managing these things are extremely important to building a happy relationship with your client. Item number 4 was do the hard work up front. Roll up your sleeves, make the commitment, double check all the information, verify the documentation you're going to need. Do the work before the process starts. If the customer balks, if they would like to leave, if they're not happy, explain to them why it's to their benefit to get your fully documented pre-approval up front. Do the hard work up front. It's the fastest way to a great relationship. Item number 5. The closing of the loan is just the beginning of the long-term relationship. Your ability to follow up, your ability to commit to a process and what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. Showing people how to value the relationship. That is going to be the difference between a long list of follow-up referrals in future business or just doing one transaction and never hearing from them again. So I shared with you the 5 things that I think are critical in dealing with a relational side of the business. If you find and follow these 5 things as a part of your life, you're going to see that your business grows, your customers are going to be happy, your referral partners are going to be enthusiastic about having a relationship. This is all about the process. Understanding that people in the process is the difference between you and just somebody online who's sending out an email that may or may not have any value to it at all. Keeping the person in the process. It's critical, and it's something you can do today that improves your tomorrow.